the Kobolds, and the Fraudulent life insurance policy. Manuira sat on the rotting wooden chair of the mead hall, which rested just a few short elven strides into the next room, where the guild had all quests listed for individual party members as well as groups of companions. By herself, she was eating a freshly baked roll with some tea, which tasted like piss. The bread was by far the most appealing part of her morning breakfast. Yawning, she pulled out her coin purse and started counting. The noise of clattering coins on a table was drowned out by the early morning chatter from adventurers opening and closing the door repeatedly, letting the cool winter air in, addressing her soul's need for warmth. 15 gold coins had she in her purse, and 8 copper coins. She had some lint tucked away there too, for safekeeping. One never knows when lint would come in handy, and she was uncertain how often having extra lint might be the difference between life and death. Strapping her coin purse to her side, her cloak pulled close, her staff nearly falling over as her elven grace snatched it before it made any discernible noise on the floor. She hoisted the purse to the table. The door to the mead hall slammed shut again. "Oi!" came the familiar squeal of someone she recognized. Turning her head, she tucked her chestnut-colored hair behind her pointed ear. A frown as the 3-foot-tall halfling Gruka. He turned, head jerking back and forth, as if he was looking for something important. Scars decorated his face, of which this halfling was proud. It was like Gruka was an orc in a past life, or some other bother. Oh gods! He pointed at her and strode towards her. With the turns he made, he slammed the blunt end of the sword, sheathed, thankfully, into several chairs and legs of adventurers, who swore at him. "Hey!" he pointed. "I don't need this. Watch your step, you damn Neanderthal." Hey, Gruka barked at the hulking human, who was easily twice the height of the halfling. Honestly, watching Gruka every day was like watching a little dog barking at a noticeably larger dog and somehow getting away with it. "I don't talk about you calling me short stack behind my back now, do I?" "No," the man growled. "But I'm not giving you shin splints now, am I? Disrespectful little cur." "Oh, for goblin's sake," Gruka said. "You best get going, you little giant." "Ew, that's what you are," says the little half-pint, the man grunted before turning. "You get that sword anywhere near me again, I'll drop kick ya." "Why don't you say that to my face?" Gruka said. "I'll show you." "You're too small to be worth a damn of my time." The man hobbled off into the other room. Honestly, a purple hand touched the halfling's shoulder. A dark elf, a thief, and tall and proud was she. "How do you even carry that thing? It's at least twice your weight." "I take it enough from them," he scowled, turning back to Manuira. "I need it not from you, Dravale." "Oh, does the little harsh halfling have a soft spot for us dark elves?" she jeered. "Oh, piss off," he snapped. Dravale, Manuira called, waving her hand. The one person in their little party she liked in more ways than one. She was ashamed to admit it publicly as her nerves tingled as she thought for just how long they'd known each other, traveling the roads far and wide in search of adventure. How is it?" Dravale winked at her. "See? Some good company." The 2 dark elf and halflings sat down, and a servant man came bringing them breakfast. The same bland bread and tea, though she could tell with the piping, angry look on Gruka's face, and as if on brand for him, he wanted to tell everyone about it. Of course, Dravale put her hand on his mouth as he dared to speak anything. "Gruka, my dear," she snickered. "No one wants to hear it, least of all Manuira, who is by far the most normal person of us all. She's an elf." He ripped the dark elf's hand from his lips. "Of course she's normal." Manuira blushed in her face. Dravale so much as thought of her as the voice of reason, and determined, as if Manuira caught herself unawares amid a band of degenerates. She was pure, and perhaps ought to be protected for such fluttering within her thoughts, and yet, even still, she dared not confess her feelings towards her. "Oh, look what you did," Dravale said. "She's all happy now, because she's the odd one out, which is normal. Oh, my dear, don't be coy." "I'm not." She turned her head, but hid her blushing cheeks with her hand. "I'm the remarkably familiar and extremely unnecessary sound of guitar entered everyone's ears. The strum patterns were off, and the steel strings squealed across the tavern room as stubby fingers slid up and down with such blundering streaks. It felt like an annoying little gnome was inside her ear, banging the side of her with dull iron nails against rock. Even the individual notes when Grok was not strumming were completely out of sync and couldn't very well be complemented with such a term called a melody or even a harmony. Everything about it was just off, and she wished so earnestly that the blasted orc would just give up his calling as a bard and rid the rest of them of such musical debauchery. The gods! A very disgruntled voice called from the other end of the room. Just one damned morning, just one, Grok, you useless bard. Where did you study music? The caves? Manuira often asked the same thing. The orc's hand went all over the guitar with a great big smile. The rhythm was completely off. If there was one harmony, no. Melody. Gods no. What even was this sound? It didn't sound anything close to something resembling music. She gritted her teeth, leaning into her staff as she covered her ears, which made whatever that was supposed to be a little more bearable. And then he opened his mouth. Let it snow, let it snow. Not only was the orc singing about snow, if you could even call it singing, and snow of all things was something they were all sick and tired of. Blizzards for days, and no end in sight. Of all things, the voice, monotone, no. It had some kind of tone, and just like everything this bard was objectively speaking, musically challenged. The voice wasn't crisp or clear, completely off tune, and had not any respect whatsoever for the original melody of the song. And of course, the voice, the singing, sounded like some drunk demon from hell. Make it stop, a dwarf sang to the horrid tune before everyone in the room started throwing their mugs of tea and bread at him, booing him off the stage. At last, the singing, or whatever all this could be considered, there wasn't even a word for what this was, had stopped. Hey, that was completely unnecessary, Grok yelled, putting his hand up to block a rove from striking him square in the face. The disrespect! Manuira saw the orc throw his guitar over his shoulder by the strap before heading downwards from the stage, snarling, walking through the cheering crowd, who were no doubt elated they wouldn't need to listen to whatever Grok was trying to entertain them with. He took his seat across from Manuira, and the dog elf and the halfling were already into their morning tea. The disrespect! There it is! Grok slammed his big fist on the table. What gives, really? I tried to entertain them, but they just don't understand aught. Oh dear, my dear Grok, Dravel spoke slyly, putting her tankard gently on the table, lowering her voice to a guttural growl. Whatever are we to do with you? Perhaps, maybe, just maybe, it is you who don't understand art. Did you consider that? Her purple finger jabbed his rippling chest. Now, Manuira put her hands up nonchalantly. What? Frowning, Grok jerked his head. Oh, well, to hell with you, you purple elf. And you're a grey bastard. Gruka rolled his eyes as he put the tankard to his lips again. Since we're talking about skin color, short stack, Grok interrupted. You take that back, the short fighter said, slamming his fist on the table. Manuira listened to the two verbally assault one another back and forth as it went, and Dravel, her darker kin, decided to kick back and relax with a sneer on her face as if she was in the front row of some comedy skit. Manuira was worried, concerned about the coin in her pocket for making rent at the end of the month. She just leaned forward, hands over her ear. The bread she had was devoured, and already her one allotment of tea for the morning was consumed. There was little else to do but go to the quest board to see if there was something her group of deranged freaking lunatics could handle without getting killed, or by chance having Grok get them killed through his poor musical talents. As a bard, he was completely worthless, though perhaps under the right condition, the threat of his talent sometimes was more than enough to influence some complex decisions. Something or someone, my dear, Dravel said, looking at her with a relatively concerned face. The dark elf insulted her so much it was impossible to tell if she was genuine. Yet despite it all, Manuira felt drawn to her beauty. Maybe she needed to accept her own desires as a misogynist. Seems to have her head in the clouds. I might not make rent. She hunched her shoulders and thought that in admitting this, a weight would be lifted off her shoulders. She was wrong. I've only 15 gold coins for the month, and this has to last me. I have 15 days to make up another 30 gold coins, and I wonder how I'm going to do it. Maybe I could rob a harlot or two. Thievery is my job, thank you very much, Ravel said, reaching forward, and a finger touched the back of Manuira's hand in a caress. Her heart raced. Honestly, if I could spare the coin, I would. Times are hard, Gruka said, which is why I'm running for mayor. Slavery, economy, all horrible things. But what we really freaking need is a steakhouse on every corner. You're going to run a serious political campaign on a promise of steakhouses. Ravel turned her head abruptly. She let a moment pass to determine if Gruka was making a serious suggestion. Well, tell me how it goes. We should look and see what's available, Grok suggested. Besides, all the high-earning quests are probably taken and too dangerous for us anyway. I'll take a look, Manuira sighed. She stretched before her leg took her into the other room of the guild hall. The bulletin board was filled with requests. Some were fashioned with excellent quality paper that stuck, and the written requests were often detailed, and the reward for the bottom, as everyone was still at breakfast. Most of the requests were still on the board. Groaning, she read through them all. Slay a dragon that had been soaring over the farms. Reward, 10 gold coins. Probably all the farmer had on him at the time of the request, but that was too dangerous a job for her group anyway, and she couldn't imagine any group doing this request for something that low. Taking another look, another page, wet and smelling of dung rats, pulled Manuira's attention. Dive into the sewers and remove the large rats from them, each rat averaging 10 feet tall. Never mind the length, which could be twice that at least. 50 copper coins per head. That wasn't a bad one for honest work, but that still couldn't come close to what she would need. There was no way they were about to slaughter 400 monstrous-sized rats to make the rent, so she kept looking, ignoring the hustle and the bustle of the people behind her. There was one more she looked at, glancing at the reward and not the quest. 150 gold coins upon completion. This quest was probably dangerous or more complex than she cared for, though her hand touched it and it scanned the page. Request giver, Lord Slith, a family heirloom. An emerald stone was stolen by Kobolds, who came from north of Carindale. Retrieve the stone and return. That's it. The Lord must have valued this quest that exceedingly to offer such a reward. She ripped off the quest from the board, gleeful, as it would solve her rent problems, at least for the month. She returned to her table and slammed the quest on it. Grok and Gruka were still arguing, but Ravel took it in her hands, scanning it. We can do this one, Manuira exclaimed. Simple, we just need to. No fine print, Ravel said. This is easy, just kobolds. Kobolds? I hate those grimy things, Grok said. You can hardly write songs about them. Well, I don't know what it is you write, but songs are not the name for them, Ravel sneered. So how about it? We get dressed, say goodbye, and off we go. Whereabouts? South does it take us? Gruka asked. Flipping over the table, a red X marked the spot. Too easy, and now she was having second guesses about it. Oh, right, here where there's a brothel. Well, Grok, can you woo your way into this one? Grok scowled at the suggestion, as if this was beneath the orc, and apparently it was. A goblin is as low as I'll go. What about a drow? Gruka asked. You had fun with that one, didn't you? It was one time. I've had enough of this first thing in the morning. Let's go. Grok shook his head. Thank the gods, Manuira said. The night transcended. The moon illumined the company's way on the road. The birds and crickets started to sing, and thankfully, though the road was long and hard, with absolutely no pun intended whatsoever, Grok felt not the need to sing them to sleep, with his voice as soothing and calming. Serene even, as getting struck in the face with a slab of wood with rusty nails sticking out the end of it. Yeah, his voice is as peaceful as that. The hums through his lips, sharp and flat, with no rhythm, just like his acoustic guitar playing. She suspected he never actually trained as a bard. It only made sense as he opened his mouth to sing. By all that is within me, to show self-restraint. Dravel pointed her gaze upwards, towards the heaven. Put a stone in your mouth and rid us of your talentless music. Cretin, foul witch, Grok said, and the annoying song ceased for a time at least. Have you no respect? No respect of you, orc, she moaned. Dare I say, I do not want to go to bed with that annoying sound thrumming around in my head when I sleep. I'll show you. Rather, let me sing. Gods no. Everyone but the orc shouted in unison. Come on, hurry then, Gruka said, before the orc starts singing again. He might, of course, scare away our quarry. boy, and poor Manuira would be out on the streets. You want that? Yes, the constant reminder of why they took this quest specifically. If it went well enough, which there was no reason it shouldn't, her bills would be paid, and all is well that ends well, assuming the best, of course. She thought to alleviate that for him by preparing her staff to cast an orb of light, but the halfling had a torch, which the dark elf Travail did not appreciate. A grimace carved itself upon that beautiful face, and she carefully moved to the back of the party formation, right next to Manuira. When they did make traveling their pastime, the adventure called for the cover of nightfall. Manuira would have preferred a little peace and quiet, but stealth was out of the question, all because of some stupid halfling who insisted without hesitation to carry his long-ass sword, which ripped up the earth with each cursed step he took. Honestly, she wasn't certain which was less tolerable, the damnable singing or the ground being cut up. Certainly, whichever god created this world wouldn't appreciate one halfling cutting into it so careless. Looking onwards, the road was beginning to carve their own little slice of distrust towards her. The light from the world was enough, and she saw the building. This brothel seemed innocent enough, well as innocent that anyone might claim a brothel to be. Lights were inside the windows, as dusty as they seemed with rotting wood on the seals and doorway. Getting closer, she noted this brothel looked like any brothel she saw in town, except for one disgusting thing about it. No, make that every disgusting thing imaginable. The wood appeared to be rotting, and the infrastructure of the building was the most poorly put together piece of architecture she'd ever seen. Surely some blasted person ripped this poor kobold off, no less. The building at the top of lit windows was swaying in the wind. It could topple at any moment in time. There was a damn plate out in the window with a steamy pile of shit creaking on a scale. Gods! Manuira exclaimed, covering her nose. See, I told you. I don't mess around with anything lower than a goblin, Grok said. So you say, the halfling said, forcing himself into the brothel. Yes, Grok entered afterward, and so too did Manuira, though she would rather she didn't have to. Her nose plugged from the stench, and Travail put her hand on her shoulder. Manuira, she spoke sensually, take your hands down, will you? You'll scorn them. Never known I, a kobold, to take offense, Gruka said. By all means. Oh my gods. Manuira tilted her head out the corner, unveiling her nose, and immediately regretted the decision. Repulsive as the scent was, she had no memory of such a foul odor to which to describe it, though this right here was a sight to behold, and it wasn't exactly what she expected. A kobold brothel. What exactly did she expect but a brothel? Silk curtains, men and women going after each other like pigs in heat. Yes, pigs. That's what brothels were filled with, but not with these kobolds. The room was dimly lit, and dare she say the curtains were silk, but there were not kobolds or scantily dressed women of any kind. No, there was simply a group of kobolds throwing stones on a table, clattering across it. A kobold looked at it, took some notes down on a piece of paper before putting the stones back in the wooden cup and dumping them back down. Repeating this, the cup of stones was passed along to the next, and they repeated the process. Where were the village halls? Was this not a brothel? There were tables, yes. There was a back doorway, and the kobold came from it. He was short and fat, grimacing with rotting teeth, and he came to greet them. What plagues an elf, a dark elf, an orc, and a halfling to come to my place? This isn't some place people just come a wandering to. What business do you have with me? I've come for your stones. The halfling pulled a knife and pointed it at the kobold, who stepped back shrieking. She heard Travail stifle a snicker from the back of the party. Give me the stone and I'll let you live. What stone? You want to play stones? There are plenty of tables to play stones with, the kobold shrieked. Stones, stones, play them you will. I'll sing, Grok suggested. Hell no, Travail said. It is clear we may have. No, I don't want to play with your stones, Grok said frustratedly. I want the stone, and then we'll be on our way. You're trying to intimidate a kobold, Travail commented. It won't work. It never works. You try then. Manuira listened to the dark elf and halfling bicker back and forth as she continued to study the room. There was a library of old dusty tomes without the spines attached. No, library wouldn't be the right word. These were just pieces of paper organized on a shelf that had no real meaning behind them. Looks for show, though perhaps to some kobolds. Maybe these kobolds looked more civilized than the rest of their foul kin. A doorway, a servant kobold, who looked more hideous with all the makeup. The lipstick smeared up the nose. She looked more like a clown at a circus rather than a servant. Playing a part, maybe. The more and more she thought about it, the less and less it seemed like a brothel. No, this couldn't be it. There was just shit outside the back. Why? She might never have the answer. But if she survives this night of insanity, that might be the one question that keeps her up at night. Truly, this was an odd adventure, and she was beginning to wonder why the Lord had such details as to where the brothel was, but didn't send his own soldiers after it. Perhaps they didn't want to be bothered or even seen at the brothel. But was this the place? She wasn't so sure. She took her staff and swung it on the halfling. God! Gruka dropped the knife, which clattered on the ground. He turned, an angry scowl written upon his little face. He looked innocent like this, and both his hands covered his head as the blunt end of the two-handed sword struck the kobold. What gives? Why'd you do that? Ah! The kobold shrieked as he flew across the room, crashing into unused tables and chairs. The ruckus flung some of the cups and stones across the room. The table, where the other kobolds were, looked shaken and stood up from their seats, flipped the table to the ground, hiding behind it. So too did their stones clatter over the floor. What was once an ordinary establishment was now a disorganized mess. Now, Manuira, look what you done did, Gruka exclaimed. Now, who will I sing to? Grok said, shaking his head as he was ready to play his guitar. Oh heavens, dear no, that is not it. Manuira closed her ears off with teeth gritting amidst the sound. It was like nails on rock. It was, and so too did the kobolds hate it, for they shrieked even louder, all because Grok growled. The sound emitting from his vocal was like a dragon screeching or scraping its claws on slabs of steel. His strumming pattern too was off, not seeming to follow a pattern, not one that she could tell. Say one thing for Grog, saying he has no sense of rhythm. Gods, by manner of damned feathers, shut that stupid thing off before I break it. The kobold who was flung across the room shook his head, standing up from the mess. Gods, how am I going to fix this? Why are you all even here? I told you, I'm here for your stones, Gruka said. As if I need another. Well, as ye can plain well see, all my stones are scattered about the floor. He stamped his feet. Now get out of my place. You're not welcome here. Then give me the stone. I don't know what you're on about, he squealed. Forgive me, Manuira turned it, pushing the halfling aside. We've gotten off on the wrong foot, you see. And the kobold answered, turning to Grok. If you don't stop strumming, I will snap that guitar in half. You don't know talent when you see it, the orc replied, and the sound stopped, followed by a hump. And you don't know how to play a damned guitar. He pointed a feathery hand at the orc. Now, Manuira said, before my companions embarrassed themselves much further. You see, the kobold said, nodding and pointing to her, this is how you talk in a civilized society. The only barbarians I see are you. Now that aside, Manuira spoke, confident as she was right now. She felt a blush come on her face at the compliment. Rather, not so much a compliment to her as it was an insult to her friends. They truly were barbaric and needed someone with a head on their shoulder. She just wished the voice of reason wasn't her. We're here because we're tracking a lead. A stone was stolen from our lord, and we've come to take it. We've directions to this brothel. Brothel? The kobold interrupted her. Lines creased on his face as a snarl pulled back his lips. Lady Elf, does it look like this is a brothel to you? Is that what you're calling my establishment these days? A brothel? Not very civilized. I wouldn't know what a kobold brothel would look like, she admitted, thinking this kobold was an excellent liar. So here we are at this establishment of whatever it is, tracking the culprits. A stone, a kobold brothel, a lord, the kobold said. I don't know anything about any of this. Either he was an excellent liar, or he truly did not know anything. Do you know nothing about a group of kobolds that would have raided a city not far from here? She asked, ignoring the grumbling of the orc and halfling behind her. How long ago? Requests came in this morning, she said. The kobold's face lit up in a sudden realization of something. His feathering lips pulled back, revealing teeth in a snarl. Sharpened teeth though they were, the snarl wasn't for her. And closing his hand, he struck his thigh repeatedly, shaking his head even. The grumbling behind her stopped immediately, and the kobolds from behind the table restored it to its place. And the cups with the spilled whatever it was they happened to be drinking. Zorik, 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 he said. When I get this place tied up, I'm going to sue his family. I'm sorry, Manuira said. Who is he? Someone who's about to be dead. He shook his head. Look, I'm just trying to make a living. I've got nothing to do with whatever Zorik did. He's about 3 miles further south, up the road. A clearing, you'll find a cave. That's where he is. Likely, if a kobold it was, whoever took the stone would be there. Now get out! Thank you kindly, she said and turned. Look, Gruka spoke softer than his usual self of all things. I'm sorry. The kobold swore in his own language, words Manuira couldn't understand, but judging by the tone of voice spoken, this kobold had not nice words to say about the halfling, who came in as aggressive as any could possibly think to be. A little diplomacy would go a long way. She thought to herself, there will be a cave, kobold of unknown numbers, possibly traps. Thank the gods Dravel was here. Though chatting away, she was with Grok, perhaps to keep him from singing along the way. So fearless leader, Groka began, his torch waving in the air as they continued to walk the track toward the clearing where the cave was said to be. Have you a plan for this? Diplomacy, Manuira suggested, barely looking down at him. Let me do the talking. You want to walk in there, knock on the door like good little civilized Inuks. Gruka laughed. You know these are kobolds, right? They don't respond to reason. Did you not hear me speak to the establishment owner of whatever that was? Her words were sharply spoken. Yes, we can reason with them. If I did it once, I can do it again. May I make a suggestion? Dravel said, running up behind and caressing her forearm. Manuira moistened her lips and wanted to draw nearer to her as a sense of breathlessness took over. All but for just a moment, I go in there all quiet like, and then I can sneak in, find the Zarik, steal the stone, and be out real easy. Except it was a good plan, she had to admit, getting her bearings as the dog elf played her advances. Was that what this was? She wasn't entirely sure if Javel felt the same way. If it wasn't Gruka's sword digging up the road, we could hide it. I bet they know we're coming for them already. This is an heirloom after all. You're right, Javel replied. We could just send him hacking away with that monstrosity of his. Perhaps rid the world of an unnecessary halfling. Oh, bugger of darkling, he swore. Lines drew themselves upon his face. My sword, my party. I'm party leader, don't you forget. More like party lunatic, Manuira spoke softly as she observed the clearing. The cave was inside, and there was no sign of a fire or heavy tracks with which there might have been a carriage, should the kobolds do that sort of thing here, or were even able to afford the upkeep of one. What was that? He snapped. Shush, Manuira whispered, putting her hand to his lips. We're right here. Well, if they're here, he ripped her hand from his lips to speak. Let's go knock on the door, make some friends, a captive audience, Grok spoke, puffing out his chest as he came forward. Gods no, Manuira exclaimed. No, no, no. The enclosed space makes your lack of musical talent far more unbearable than it is. You need to learn to listen to me more. Grok put his hands on his hips as if disappointed. My music is grand. Your music sounds like a pig squealing after some dung rat of an idiot impaled it with a pitchfork, Dravel swore. Now enough with this dastardly foolery. Without further delay, Manuira led the party, which she was not the leader of, according to Gruka, to the short spout into the mouth of the cave. The grey walls were enclosed, and no light save for the one torch. And there was furthermore nothing to suggest anything or anyone had been inside this cave. The crags were sharp in places, and there was a large slant upwards. At the top of it was a large double wooden door. Biting her lip, it was clear that everyone and everything they were looking for was behind it, and for the first time, her party was completely silent. Manuira took a breath as she watched as Dravel silently crept to the door. Grok followed followed behind her, and then Gruka, who grumbled silently to himself, wanting to speak his mind at all hours of the day. Heaven knows he tried to talk a dog to death. His hands kept the heavy sword on him from chopping up the ground behind him, honestly wishing he did that always, though knowing it would likely throw out his back for long duration. She was curious as to why he insisted all the time on carrying a sword he couldn't use efficiently at all. Dravel had her tools out, and with the lockpick rattling away, the lockpick broke and pieces clambered silently on the rock. Dravel grimaced with gritting teeth and squinting eyes as she pulled out another set. Settling in, the pick went in another time. In the silence of it all, Manuira found it unsettling. The dark elf hissed again with another broken pick. "Damn," she whispered. "What are we waiting for?" The halfling spoke. "Just another pick." Dravel's eyes gaped open. "Gruka, no!" Manuira gasped as she turned, seeing the halfling walk up, the sword resting on his shoulders with a dull edge, both hands wrapped around the hilt. Screaming like a deranged freaking lunatic, he twisted his body, striking the door, just barely missing the top of Dravel's head, who pushed herself back on the ground, scurrying underneath the splinter. Another turn and he ripped it off. "Gruka!" Manuira exclaimed. Her hands went in to grab his shoulders, but retracted as she thought it was a bad idea. "What are you doing? What's it look like?" He splintered his blade into the door, splintering it further. "Door's open." "Gruka!" Manuira scowled. "Are you serious?" "Yes, I'm serious. This door is seriously open." He jested, disappearing behind it. "It doesn't get more open than this." "Great!" Manuira rolled her eyes as Grok went to help Dravel back on her feet. They all walked into the other room, where there appeared to be some ancient scrolls, some dusty tomes, some rocks, many of which were literally just that, rocks, and nothing at all that looked like the stone they were looking for. There were some paintings from the elven artists hanging on the wall with golden frames, which appeared to have sweat stains on. "Search everything, every nook and cranny," Ruka said. "I'll be damned if we leave anything behind worth taking." "And you," Manuira stammered, "we're here to talk some sense into them and get the stone, nothing more." "And you're the one who might be out on the streets now," he said. "Shut your pointed ear and get searching. It might be here." "It's her mouth that's open, you dumb twat," Dravel spoke harshly. "Manuira dear, let's hurry. If it's here, there'd be no need to talk. But best hurry. Who knows how reasonable they'll be with the shattered door. It's their own damn fault for locking it." The blade scraped against the floor as Gruka walked with it to her chest, opening it. "They shouldn't lock no doors. This is a cave. Why wouldn't they lock their doors?" Grok said, shuffling through a bookshelf. "Why wouldn't they do the reasonable thing?" Dravel said, hand on her hips as Manuira scanned the rest of the room. "Oh sure, a wanton adventurer might say, hey, they stole this loot fair and square. I can't with you, such a bother." "Stop yappering," Gruka slammed the lid of the chest down. It creaked. "Now, they definitely know we're here," Manuira said. "They'll be here shortly." "From where though?" Gruka complained as he was nose deep in some kitchen silver plates. "Oh, you damn idiot," Grok said. "Did you not see the large door? A set of double doors there were, outside the back, which of course was closed and locked. The door had a padlock, and she imagined that Dravel would have been unable to get through. If the lock just getting into this room, which apparently had nothing of value in it, would be too much for her skill as a locksmith. So what does Gruka do?" she thought as she rolled her eyes, watching the halfling stamp his feet in a barbaric rage and starts pummeling the door with his foot. "Grok, follow him, will you?" Manuira advised him. "Dravel and I will sit back a touch. They are gonna be none too happy about a little halfling busting up their doors." "Still wanna try diplomacy?" Dravel asked, scuttering about, eyes completely focused on the door, which the halfling was carelessly hacking away at, now no longer kicking it. "Maybe," she said, "but Gruka's making this very difficult." They approached a door of splittering wood, and the streaks of kobolds squealed from behind them. The shards of wood came hither, scattering onto the floor. Manuira grunted as some scratched across her face. She put a staff out before the halfling ripped the door off its hinges. Looking forward, the halflings screaming at these feathery kobolds, shouted in their language at them, words she did not know, and how terrified these poor creatures must be with a halfling wielding a sword far too big for him. Barreling down both their doors, there was a lot of explaining to do. "I'm going to cut you all up, every single one of you," Gruka declared. "Get out of my cave." A noticeably larger kobold came out, a large spear he held. "What do you want?" "Gruka, you aren't helping anyone like this. Manuira spoke softly, her hand on his shoulders, and pulled him backward. She turned to face the kobold who spoke. The feathers on his arms were blacker than soot. "We come from the Adventurers Guild, from over yonder in the village of Carindale. Perhaps you've heard of it. What of it? What's it gotta do with some half-pint piece of stiffle?" Manuira struck him across the face with her staff before running back to the kobold whom she spoke, chuckling rather nervously. "Sorry about my associate. He tends to take offense at his stature. We're here searching for an heirloom for the Lord Slith, a fellow you can agree, and not one without his resources." "And you think I took it?" he said. "Yes," she said. "Well, we were led this way by way of a place we previously mistook as a brothel. Imagine my friend Gruka's disappointment when it wasn't. So, have you the stone? If I did, I wouldn't just hand it to you," he said, "especially not after you destroyed my—" He tilted his way to look behind her. "Not one, but two of my doors. You see," she said, "we're special adventurers we are, and I must—" She contemplated what to tell him. Honestly, dealing with kobold bandits no less, she didn't expect him to be so agreeable. Was this some unknown charismatic personality of hers she didn't know she had? If so, then surely she must learn to use this power more often. "If you have the stone, I can show you what it looks like, so you may provide it, and I can offer you a sizable trade for it. What do you have?" he asked, his attention completely undivided on her. She heard the mumbling of her friends behind, and their steps walked away. One such voice at a whisper was Dravel's, who spoke so softly that not even Manuira, with her sensitive ears, could hear it. The drastic change in her elf companion was one of stunning shock. Kobolds, she knew and understood, dealing with all manner of creatures, some more agreeable than others, and the most disagreeable even more than goblins, were these feathery kobolds. Any kobold who had any sense, and this one clearly did, would be outraged to have to replace not one, but two sets of doors that some half-wit broke open, and yet this kobold seemed very amiable in quaint relation to Manuira. Surely neither Grog, he best not start singing, nor Gruka had the prowess or charisma to pull this off. "I'm an agent, you see," Manuira began to weave her lie. "I insure people, bandits, adventurers, anyone who particularly has a dangerous profession that might have a high probability of being killed. You are kobolds and your lives are precious, but I'm sure that during your raids you lose someone. They die and you have to mourn. We all have these feelings, and sometimes accidents do happen. This is right, I think. What I do is I relieve some of the stress and responsibility, particularly the cost of burying someone." Holy shit, Dravel's jaw dropped. Is she really trying to sell life insurance? This will never work. "We aren't often burying something," the kobold said, snarling. "May I ask why?" she said. "Oh, we can never afford anything nice like a coffin," he replied. "And that is exactly what I do," she said. "Forgive me, my name is Manuira." "You are?" "Zorik," he answered. "By the gods, it's working. How?" "So this is what I do." Manuira didn't think he'd be so forward with his name. "How? Just how is this working? She's been talking out of her ass this entire time, and nothing at all would be consistent, or so she believed. "What I do is I take a small portion each month, normally 200 gold coins per head. When the insured dies, what I then do is purchase funeral services. This includes everything related to burial costs, up to and including space at a gravesite, a coffin, and a tombstone. Whatever is left over when the policy is taken out goes to the family of the dead and the mourners." She took a breath. Zorik nodded, showing he was interested, and continued to listen to each and every word she said. This was all completely wrong, and a lie, but he didn't know that. Hell, even she wouldn't believe her. The kobolds behind him seemed less on edge than they were before, but their narrow gazes held against the doorway, where her companions were conversing amongst themselves. "What are mourners?" Zorik asked, clearly buying the lie. "What were mourners? This is something which not everyone needs. I trust you to understand, but these are people who are paid to professionally mourn the passing," she said, not knowing if that's at all what mourners did. "Can we be mourners?" Zurich said, clearly trying to vie for some semblance of opportunity for him to scam her out of this obviously fraudulent policy. "No," she said. "Well, you could, But for other people, you see, you'll be too busy mourning the loss, and whatever is left over, like I said, belongs to the family of the dead, so it wouldn't really be necessary. Now 200 is very expensive, and I'm sure there are a lot of people here, so Zirik, if I have your attention, she continued uninterrupted, I will discount that premium by half, so only 100 gold coins, a head per month, if you present me with the stone. Hang on, will you? He said. Absolutely, she smiled politely. She turned her gaze towards her party members, who were without a doubt completely shocked as she was that this seemed to be working. She felt sweat bead down her face as Arik removed himself from her and spoke his language to the other kobolds. They chatted, and with excitement they all seemed pleased. The jittery howls, the stamping of feet which sounded like someone was dancing gleefully, like a little boy who got excited he received his first ball to play with. She found happiness in the realization, and then guilt plagued her that she would consider doing this to these poor creatures. But her rent wasn't going to pay itself. Zarik returned to her, hands at his side, and his spear up in a non-threatening fashion. You have the policy, right? Yes, she lied. I have to write one up. But yes, thank the gods, he shouted in elation. We've been waiting for some salvation from these accursed goblins. You don't even know. What's this stone look like? Goblins. What do kobolds ever have to do with goblins? She showed him a picture of the stone from the guild listing. He nodded and whispered something to one of his kobolds, who scurried off down the halls. She took out a piece of parchment, laid it on the table, and scribbled some words on it. Zarik breathed down her neck. She hoped to whatever gods that were lying watch over her life that he didn't read Elvish. Really, all she remembered to write at a given moment was a rather infamous poem about two lovers and their quarrels, a poem which formatted in such a way that looked like the most formal thing she'd ever written. There was nothing about insurance, life, or anything, just the poem and a little pair of lines with which they would sign, and she pushed the parchment to him, a quill she had, and he signed it. Pleasure, she said, forging her own signature on it. The kobold came back from the hallway. Here it is, Zarik said. The kobold passed the stone to Zarik, who then turned it to Manuira. Aside from her friend's constant jaw-dropping, which undoubtedly should have given away that this scenario was completely absurd, she was stunned that the kobold trusted her implicitly, that he'd believe any bogus lie that came out of her mouth. She almost felt horrible about it. The stone in her hand, satisfied as she was that this was the right stone, she nodded and handed the parchment back to Zarik, who held it in the air, a bright smile on his face, almost as if he was worshipping a god, and that god was some shitty elf poem which he couldn't read. Zarik, it was a pleasure, she said, and I'll return within a week's time to collect the premium for this policy. No need to bother yourself with those pesky goblins ever again. Still don't know what that was about. Thank you, Manuira, he said, probably confident as he likely thought it was he who swindled her. Poor fool. She hoped he didn't need to cash in the policy before she collected the first premium. Anytime. And of course, you know where to find me. And you should the need arise to check out the policy, she said. Her companions left the cave, and the four of them looked at one another, all of them smiling. Walking down the pathway back to the center of town, she made sure the stone was kept safe and not in that klut's hands. The walk was quiet, and now all of a sudden, as if there was no one around that could hear anyone, Travail took her shoulders and turned her around with a frown. Manuira. Yes, she squeaked in reply. You just sold a fraudulent life insurance policy to kobold bandits, she said. I can't believe that actually worked. Yeah, but I couldn't sing. Shush, Groka interrupted Grok. No, let's leave before they found out they've been had. Agreed. Manuira and her friends arrived in the guild hall the following morning right before breakfast. The guildmaster was the first one in as he was hanging up the daily quests from members of this establishment, and he was always the chipper one in the morning, excited to get on with the next day's activities and trainings and scoldings to those new adventurers who needed it. Ah, he turned. Come back from a quest, or did you take the day off yesterday? Oh, dare I say, George. Javel wrapped her arms around Manuira's shoulder. We've got a little diplomat here. We finished this quest. she began, as Manuira fetched the stone and dropped it in the guildmaster's hand, with no incident, and it was all her doing. "Ah," he said. "Well, follow me into my office. I've the gold for you all there." Manuira followed Jorg up the stairs and past some windows with a fetching view of the courtyard. Some apple trees spread out with some hedges along the way. Circles of weapons where the early morning trainers were. Training the next generation of soldiers, no doubt. A library she remembered studying at when she was but a child over on the other side of town could be seen, right next to the mayor's town hall. At last, they entered a room and Jorg took a seat in his chair, opened a drawer from his mahogany desk, and started counting all the coins. "Tell me, how did you do it?" he asked. "I sold the Kobolds a fraudulent life insurance policy," she admitted, slouching down in her chair as if she had just committed high treason. Jorg immediately stopped counting and looked up at her. "You," he began to say, but stopped his words immediately as he appeared to ponder the words that were just said, as if this was just a preposterous plan that simply couldn't have worked. "What?" "I sold the Kobolds a policy, which they think is real," she said, "in exchange for the heirloom." "How?" He spoke this word emphatically, and so she told him everything, and he was overly impressed. So, too, was Dravel, who had her purple hand combing through her hair. "She's a keeper, this one. While I don't mind a good fight here and there, she made sure I didn't get my head lopped off by a Neanderthal." Manuira blushed and stood, grabbing her gold quickly, and rushed out of the office without saying another word, and drove off into the mess hall for a morning breakfast.